So, after finishing up Skeleton Crew quite a while ago now, I decided I'll do a ranking of all the short stories in this collection. And like I did with Night Shift, I'll only be saying a sentence or two about each one. And I would like to mention that this collection has 2 novellas in here as well, and I will be counting those too. And I won't be including Paranoid, A Chant, and For Owen as they're just poems and they don't really fit under the short story category. Anyway, enough with that, let's get straight into it. Number 20, The Ballad of the Flexible Bullet. A 70-page novella with a really stupid concept, a motif of a flexible bullet that never really ties together with the main story, and there isn't even a good payoff. Number 19, Beach World. What could have been a terrifying, stranded in the middle of nowhere alien landscape business kind of story ends up being a boring, incohesive mess of a story that just is very forgettable. However, later on in this collection you will find a story with a similar kind of concept that is pulled off much better. Number 18, Big Wheels, The Tale of a Laundry Game. The second in the Milkman installment, and I basically don't feel like there's any reason for the Milkman stories to exist, and to be honest, I don't remember anything from that story, so that's why it's so low. Number 17, The Wedding Gig. This is one of those short stories that really suffers from being a short story, as everything feels so rushed in explanation. But at the same time, I wouldn't want this story to be expanded out to a novella or a novel because it's not very good. Number 16, Morning Deliveries. The first of the Milkman stories, and yeah, like the second iteration, I just don't really remember anything from it, and I remember it being mildly creepy, but that's about it. Number 15, Nona. The idea behind this story is great, as there are multiple possible scenarios for what's going on with the unreliable narrator trait, and it's fun to theorise what exactly is going on, but I felt in execution it fell a bit flat. Number 14, The Reach, a story that merely exists to close out the collection. It's a strange one that has a silly premise. I find it kind of hard to tell what's going on, but at the same time, it hits hard by the time you finish it, so yeah, it's strange, but it's pretty good. Number 13, Here There Be Tigers. This is where we get into the really good stuff. This is great, as it perfectly touches on the irrational fears that can exist within a child's mind at a young age, and it does a great job at bringing them to life. Number 12, The Reaper's Image. The earliest story that was written for this collection, I think King wrote it back in the late 60s. It definitely has that feel to it. Just classic horror, nothing more, nothing less. Just really good. Number 11, Uncle Otto's Truck. What starts out as a seemingly pointless story with nothing to speak of turned into a really good display of paranoia, and with paranoia, it becomes a reality, and reality becomes very creepy. Number 10, Grandma. You talk about a really scary story. Now this is a scary story. It's one of those ones that I think is best going into not knowing much about it at all, but it's based off of fears that Stephen King had as a child, and it is horrifying. Number 9, Cain Rose Up. A very short story that puts us in the mind of a deranged college student. It is often compared to Rage, which is a Stephen King novel which went out of print because it had problematic themes into it, and the way it linked to real life tragedies. But Cain Rose Up is a much more disturbing story than the uninteresting bore fest that is Rage, and Cain Rose Up, really good story. Number 8, The Man Who Would Not Shake Hands. Although this might seem like a bit of a boring story about a rude gentleman who doesn't shake hands, it's worth sticking around for, as it has a pretty good reason to not shake hands. Also, if you're a fan of the breathing method from different seasons, you'll definitely enjoy this story. Number 7, The Mist. It's the fucking Mist. Like, what else can I say from it, aside from it's probably the most beloved novella in here. And it's a great story, it's a scary story. As I already mentioned, it's the second of the novellas, by far the best one, and it was made into a movie by Frank Darabont, which a lot of people really enjoy. Number 6, Mrs. Todd's Shortcut. This story starts out pretty unremarkable, but by the end of it, I can guarantee you that you'll be very interested in how Mrs. Todd manages to shave a few seconds off of her day. Number 5, The Raft. This is basically everything that you want in a horror story. It has horny teens, an indescribable monster, a lake, a disturbing ending, and most importantly, some of the most brutal body horror that Stephen King has ever written. It is fantastic, and the gore in this story will never leave me. Number 4, Word Processor of the Gods. This is another eerie story that's a tough one to talk about because I think it's best going into this one knowing nothing at all. But to be very vague, it's about a guy that gets a word processor that has a bizarre effect on reality. Number 3, The Monkey. This is a longer story than most. It's not quite a novella, but it is really gripping and scary. My nana used to have a toy that used to scare the fuck out of me whenever it got turned on, so this story really hit home with me, and it's one of the more scary ones in the collection. And also, now it's time for a little disclaimer, because we've reached the top 2. I am so sad. I am so goddamn sad that both of these stories can't be number 1. I love them both just about equally, but if I was put at gunpoint, I'd rank them like this. At number 2, we have Survivor Type. Disgusting. Really disgusting and gritty. This story, like The Raft, has so much imagery that will never leave my head, and the slow mental decline, while not surprising given the circumstances, still scared me to death. I love Survivor Type. And it's also worth mentioning, on Shudder, it got turned into an animated segment in the Creepshow, in one of the Creepshow specials. That was a really good animated thing. It was about 20 minutes long. Really good. Check it out. And number 1 is The Jaunt. There is a reason why this is most Stephen King fans' favourite short story. It begins as a sci-fi story, and then a mildly creepy thing happens, and then even a creepier thing happens, and then a really horrible thing happens, and by the end of the story, the most terrifying, unimaginable horror just explodes, and oh my god, there has not been a day go by that I haven't thought about this story, and it only becomes more dread-filled each time I think about it. It is absolutely amazing, and I could read this story over and over again and just not get sick of it. It's so good. So there is Skeleton Crew, ranked from worst to best, and I think it's pretty obvious that I liked Skeleton Crew a lot more than Night Shift. There was a lot of great stories in here, and I cannot wait to revisit it, especially some of my favourites someday. Anyway, I'll see you later.